And would you say that it's inevitable that, again, going back to this scale of 1 to 10, we will eventually get to 10, or you don't necessarily get there?
I suppose when thinking of the definition of 10, if 10 where it's completely open and it's a free-for-all.
But perhaps governed, as you said.
Well, that's where I think that, because we have BYOD, so absolutely staff, currently we provide, devices, standard devices, and we classify them from a device management as either fully supported, there's trusted, or other, or non-supported. I think I would say that because we are, to use the Microsoft term, all in, we are 100% in how can we absolutely enable our staff to access the information wherever they are on the device of their choice, but doing it in a way that enables them to be productive but actually protects the company. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Now,
so I think most companies are all in. I think the difference is some companies just don't know about it. I'll give you a great example. There was an IT manager that gave me a story whereby he received a bottle of champagne from a large CRM provider because they had 5,000 accounts. And he said, well, I didn't know about that. We're not even a customer. And actually, when he did the digging, he realized other departments in his organization had actually, purchased these services. So I think pretty much every company is in, and the difference is do you know about it or don't you? Because consumerization it's inevitable.
So I think that brings the real challenge back to the IT table, which is what are you competing with? Because the IT departments are competing with those services effectively built for consumers with certain applications that consumers want to have or people think are driving productivity for them. I said the Evernotes, the Salesforce.coms, whatever those things may be. And because they're so easy to access and so easy to get, by and large they're delivered via a web-based application. There's nothing really to stop them. And that's the benchmark. So I think when we talk about, I referenced earlier to the younger generation, if you like, and the expectations in there, those are their expectations to IT. And I'm sure many in the room and on the panel here have been in the situation where I can get this in 36 hours from outside. Why is it going to take you 10 weeks to provide? That's not what we want. And so I think that the requirement, the consumerization requirement, the pressure is speed, flexibility, and the ability to drive things very quickly. Because if you can't, then you'll have a department somewhere with a budget that will say, if I don't do this, I won't get my product out. Thanks very much. We'll go our own way.
I mean, just to add, I think that certainly my experience of it has been that's been a very good thing as well. I think there's been a tendency sometimes to strategically plan a huge distance in advance, not necessarily being as agile as we should have been, not being able to react necessarily. I think the pressure of consumerization certainly has helped a huge amount in prioritizing the things that are important, from a user perspective, and getting the right elements in the plans for us to do and making sure they get delivered quickly.
Yeah, I guess you need to rethink your governance models in IT because otherwise you're going to get overtaken. So you've got to find a way to really work closely with the business, include them in the decision making, listen better to them than you might have done in the past, because the constraints the constraints around building IT system, it takes weeks, it takes months or even years to kind of come up with this monster that actually then nobody wants, right? And you can have it in days. Whether this is a software as a service, an application, or a new infrastructure, a new server, or whatever, you can spin it up in either hours, minutes, or it takes a few days. And I think you need to look at how you interact and how you collaborate with the business around these topics, right? And if you don't do it, they'll just overtake you.
Is there some practical steps around educating the users then that the IT team needs to drive? Do you think?
I think yes. I think first of all, I mean to fend off the risk you have with bring your own device, not speaking about applications, I think you need to educate that the user has much more responsibility to take care of something that you as an IT department can't lock down in the way you lock down the laptop, for example, right? I mean, you know, over 15 years, the industry tried to create that bulletproof shield from the, you know, laptop to the mainframe or to the big servers. This is broken now, so you got to really, until you figured out how you re-architect your applications so that the data you need to protect stays safe, whilst the end system could be whatever it is, right, or whatever the user wants it to be. So whilst this is happening, actually you need to raise awareness with your users that they have more responsibility. They need to guard this device. They need to guard the content on the device. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, that's a lot of like learning to do and a lot of communication from an IT department. We see it with many of our customers. Mm-hmm.
And Maria, I see you nodding.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that was the point I was at the previous conversation. I think the key thing that we've learned as well is the importance of educating our workforce. And I think one of the things that we've done in the last few years has been very clear on our data classification and how do we classify data. And we have, you know, it has to be relatively easy that for users to be able to understand it, and then helping them, you know, make them aware of, you know, the potential risks and challenges, and having that as an ongoing education. So within Microsoft, we have what we call HBI, MBI, and LBI. High business impact data, which would be, you know, personal PII data or code, or, you know, something that is, you know, critical. If it was lost or accessed in the wrong way, would have a severe impact to the organization. We have MBI. Once again, that would be, as I say, medium business impact. That would be information that is confidential, that hasn't been in the public domain yet, that would cause a level of, you know, risk if it was exposed. And then LBI. And LBI is low business data, and that would be things like, you know, stuff that in some ways would be in the product domain, you know, stuff about our products or stuff that could be available on the internet, etc. And so from our perspective, if a device wants to access data that is LBI, we don't mind, because we know that data is LBI. And as I say, we've spent quite a lot of time really helping educate our users on the importance of data classification and considering and making them aware and have a level, I'm not saying have accountability, but think about it in how they would manage their own security or their credit card or their own financial bank accounts, you know, and think of Microsoft data in similar ways. So I think data classification and I think employee awareness is an absolutely crucial component.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add, I completely agree in terms of the importance of the education part. I mean, in the first 6 months of this year, we were, and this is globally rather than just from UK and Ireland where I'm responsible, really pushing a digital awareness across the whole of our employee population. And that's related to some of the things that were coming up in terms of consumerization, but wider in terms of that, you know, social media, how you need to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, in what forms you're doing it, your reputation, IBM's reputation in our case, but anybody else's in terms of the other organisations here, and just really trying to really drive home how important the understanding of the whole new digital world is.
Thank you.
But I mean, I know you mentioned earlier that it wasn't accountability, but actually is it accountability? You know, effectively being able to put, you know, technical controls or the ability to be able to monitor fundamentally isn't the intent actually to create a degree of accountability so that if a consumer or a user does wish to do something, then actually they are held accountable. I mean, isn't that really ultimately what we're getting down to with regards to consumerization?
So productivity is the benefit, but there is this question about educating the users to this new world, both very broadly in terms of what's happening out there, but also their personal role in making this chain still secure, I guess. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, is there a business case internally around consumerization that says perhaps you've got longer refresh cycles of kit, perhaps you have open source apps which are, you know, cheaper? Is this something that you look at in terms of the future, perhaps?
Just very quickly on that one, just in terms, I know I mentioned our change in terms of device, you know, smartphone device. In terms of business case, there was a huge swell of demand, as everybody will have seen, in terms of choice, and people not particularly happy with the old brick that we were providing 2 or 3 years ago, that they, you know, when, you know, iPhone and other devices were out. Yeah, I think in terms of the, you know, how we do it. Sorry, I've lost my point. What? Just going.
Business case. Can you make?
Sorry, business case. Sorry, the business case part was the non-paying for devices has enabled a huge amount of back-end infrastructure to be put in place a lot quicker. That was really the point I wanted to get across. So we have now enabled 14,000 people in UK and Ireland, where we were at 1,500, 2,000 in terms of mobile device access before. So that was really the point I wanted to make in terms of the business case. In terms of financial, probably pretty much balanced, but in terms of productivity and flexibility, huge amount of difference.
And Mary, any example from your side?
It's interesting. So I think, as you say, the focus within internally is really on the productivity, and we've had a lot of lessons learned over the last few years. Because obviously, as you say, meeting the demand where people want to have cooler, sexier devices had obviously, you know, put pressure on the IT teams to deliver. Where the standard, even though staff can bring their own device, there is what we would have had our standard laptops, and they wanted the secret, you know, sexier ones. But what as part of the learnings, and I imagine some of you may have experienced this as well, is that there's the balance of, you can have depending on the device that you have, then you are not getting the robustness or some of the functionality that you're used to in having a really robust device. And we've seen that, you know, some of the early frustration where when some of our staff have got more consumer type laptops, for example, you know, lighter, but they wouldn't have, you know, they'd have to have dongles to be able to connect to the internet connection, or they'd have to have dongles to connect to the screen. You know, so I think that there's a lot of learnings that we have seen over the last few years in helping how do we support our staff around different types of consumer devices. But I think the business case for us is just productivity, productivity, productivity. And our culture with our, you know, 90,000 staff, and we've, you know, all have mobile phones and access and corporate email and access and the information they need, is to enable them to be able to be productive everywhere and anywhere. And that's part of our culture, no matter where. We provide broadband at home for our employees as well. So it's that you can work, you know, as in yesterday outside, I was able to do access to corporate network, do a number of different things from no matter where I am. And that's a key fundamental piece for Microsoft. It's all about the productivity and being able to work when you can and where you are, but in a secure
Sure.
way.
Thank you.
Yeah, we see a lot of positive business cases, not only on the devices or any device, have the services on any device, anywhere where you are, raises productivity significantly with our customers. And obviously then when you have software as a service on top, you know, you get rid of the infrastructure you used to have for that, saves you a lot of money, as well as you gain the agility that you can scale. You acquire a new company, 5,000 new users, you just cut them over and you provision them in a day. It's not something you do quickly if you have the infrastructure to build up and, you know, include that. So there's a lot of examples where, you know, companies saved a lot of money doing so.
Okay, thank you. Dave, you
So I see the business case on the mobility side for a field and for a field workforce, so a field sales force in particular, being able to have that ability to do the work they need to do from wherever, rather than have to go back to any kind of base touch point to go and physically perform any of the kind of transactional activities or things they need to do to support their business. So I see the case for that. I think it's on balance with the reality of the cost model. I'm not so sure. I think it's a productivity gain rather than a cost saving for the most part. I don't think I really see cost savings in there, but I do see the mobility piece. But I also see it from a different perspective, also as an employer. So parking the nature of the company, just thinking about it as an employer of people for a second. Yeah. And I see what it also starts to do, and we've seen this with device. I'm sure everyone in the room is having this experience, which is it blurs the boundary of working times. And that has a whole different set of implications. So, you know, we want to provide this productivity, we want to provide all of this access, and we do. And then it's the 11 p.m. people on the phone. It's, you know, it's the weekends when everyone's doing things, and it starts to blur things. And so I think as we go through the consumerization, we need to govern the devices and all those things. But at some point in time, we also have to look at how we, in one sense, bring some governance back to the working and operational hours of people. because it starts to generate a different type of stress in the workforce. And so I can see lots of pros, and I can also see the emergence of some cons, not just around the privacy piece, but around that kind of always on. And I think in reality that seems healthy for a period, but it's not a sustainable thing to do.
And I think just to pick up on a point, I think it's a very good one. Certainly working with global teams, that becomes very, very difficult in terms of you're bound to be getting requests in all sorts of times of the day, and if you can exacerbate the problem in terms of the amount of things that are being exchanged over the weekend and expectation that you will respond. I think it's ensuring that employees have the confidence to turn off, because I think that having it there and being available is extremely useful, more productive, adds from a work-life integration, you would say, rather than balance perhaps these days. But you do need to make sure that certainly, more junior staff perhaps don't feel under pressure to be responding to things that turn up on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday.